Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Haase, and I'm thrilled to be with you for today's Humans of IT session on battling fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the workplace. In today's session, we'll be discussing why empathy is so important, how we get stuck in a loop of uncertainty, doubt, and regret, some practical tools that you can use for overcoming your fears, why so many of us experience imposter syndrome, and how we can break free and build our community of support. Let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Sarah Haase. I'm a product manager and collaboration evangelist living in Minnesota. I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP, a podcaster, and a conference speaker. But I'm also a woman in tech, a leader, a mentor, and most importantly, a mom. And I'm thrilled to be here to share with you my thoughts and ideas with you about what it means to be a human of IT. So let's go ahead and get started. Whether we're working as people leaders, peer mentors, individual contributors, or team leads, it's vital that we bring a sense of empathy to our work and to our professional relationships. Effective employees and leaders create an environment that is engaging, rich, diverse, and provides a context where everyone can thrive in when they bring themselves to work every day. And bringing yourself to work and creating a helpful context requires a diverse set of skill sets that includes things like active listening, strategic thinking, communication, and empathy. A 2020 global study by Qualtrics found that 42% of people have experienced a decline in mental health over the last 2 years. 67% have increased stress, 54% are emotionally exhausted, 50% of us are irritable, and 28% of us are having trouble concentrating. When you think about these statistics and you line it up with so many of the struggles that we have all been facing, and our friends, our colleagues, and our family members have been facing, it really crystallizes on the need why empathy at work is so important. And here's the reality. You don't have to be a mental health expert to display empathy at work. If you're a manager, hold regular one-on-one meetings with your employees. Ask them how they're doing. Show them you're paying attention and that you care. And most importantly, take your cues from what they want to share with you. So instead of pushing for more information, be an active and open listener and be ready to listen to what they have to share. If you're not a people leader, you can still take an active, empathetic approach by listening to your coworkers, creating room and space for your project team members, and even your leaders to be able to share their thoughts, check in with them, ask questions, and see how they're doing. All of us can work to be transparent, set clear expectations, and make sure that we're open to change. We can also make sure that we know about the mental health resources that are available through our companies, our local communities, and our organizations to make sure that we're ready to provide that information as people need it. You never know when such a simple thing as showing someone where information is available for them to get assistance can really be the lifeline that they need to help them through a tough situation. So bottom line, empathy contributes to positive relationships, stronger organizations, and stronger company cultures. And it's such a critical part of what we all need to do to make sure that we're helping one another and practicing that human of IT spirit every single day. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about how and why many of us get stuck in a loop of fear, uncertainty, and doubt at work. Some of us have that niggling voice in the back of our heads, telling us that we missed the mark or that we didn't perform as well as we would have liked to. Some of us stay quiet, sure that we're out of our depth, and that others will see through us and know that we may not be as confident as we would like to be in ourselves. Today, I'm going to focus on two of the biggest culprits that I see, both reflected in myself and that I often have in conversations with mentees. And those things are meeting regret and imposter syndrome. Let's kick it off with talking about meeting regret. How many of you have left a meeting or a presentation filled with some kind of regret? Regret for not saying the right thing. Regret for not saying something well enough. Regret that we left out key details, or sometimes having regret for something that we didn't say. It's the answer that we didn't give or the details we didn't provide. Most of us will have that sense of regret after a meeting, a presentation, or a phone call at some point in our career, and we may even ruminate on it for a few hours or a few days afterwards. But many of us will be able to eventually move on from that thought. Those with chronic meeting regret face this ongoing rumination continually And it can really be challenging to conquer that consistent feeling of meeting regret. And it can become more and more palpable until we literally have trouble moving ourselves off of it and being able to come off of mute on those work calls. So I want to give you some practical tips and things that you can think about and things that you can do to overcome this feeling of meeting regret. First, it's really important to reframe the internal commentary that you have after a meeting or after a presentation. Self-criticism is a really powerful weapon, and it can often lead us to spiral out of control. So to stop the negative loop, one of the things that I like to do is to actually say something to myself out loud. Something like, I didn't answer that question as well as I would have liked to, but I'm going to do it better next time. That might sound trite or difficult, especially if you say it out loud to yourself. But here's the thing, it's the type of cognitive behavior therapy that can really help us to rewire not just what we believe about what we can do in future meetings, but it'll also help us to rewrite some of that self-criticism that may be stuck in your head. Another thing that I've found really helpful is to give yourself a redo. If you can't stop thinking about the fact that you just didn't present something as well as you would have liked to in a presentation or on a meeting, stop ruminating about it and actually take the opportunity to set yourself up with some space to be able to do it again. Replay the meeting or the presentation in your mind, but this time say out loud all the things that you wish that you would have said in that meeting. Hearing yourself saying those things clearly and concisely trains your brain to be able to believe that you're capable of delivering a clearer message. It can also lead to you building some muscle memory around how to deliver the message better and to go into your next set of meetings with a little bit more confidence about what you can do and how you can deliver a strong message. So it's a really good idea to say things out loud. And the best thing is you can redo a meeting and practice the redo as many times as you need to until you feel comfortable and confident in your approach and what you're looking to be able to present. Another thing that I like to do is to practice meeting gratitude and certainly presentation gratitude. So taking a few minutes after a presentation or a big meeting to reflect on how you did. All of us are really good at looking for the things that didn't go well or that we didn't do as well as we would have liked. But sometimes it's really important to stop and look for the good and the things that did go well. So maybe ask yourself, what did I do really well in this meeting? What did I present well? Take a few minutes and jot it down, whether you're a journaler or whether you even like to use OneNote. I have a OneNote notebook that I can use where I can jot down notes for myself. And the best thing is those notes can be something that you look at in the future to be able to help prepare yourself for that next presentation. So keeping this kind of a gratitude journal can help you shift your focus from what didn't go right or what didn't go well to keep you focused on what you're grateful for and where you can project yourself going to in a more positive way in the future. And then finally, make sure that you're seeking feedback from others. Oftentimes, we can really be our harshest critic. And one way to ensure that you're getting an unbiased perspective on how you did in a meeting is to ask for feedback on your performance from a few trusted advisors. So something that I like to do after a big meeting or presentation is send a quick instant message to a couple of people that were on that call that I know are going to give me their honest feedback. Ask them to let me know how I did. It can actually be very low key, especially if you ask them in an instant message rather than putting them on the spot in a phone call or in a face-to-face meeting, but it gives you the opportunity to actually seek feedback from them and to be able to take that feedback, collect it, and be able to use it to really kind of reframe what you might think about your own performance during the meeting and take a more well-rounded and unbiased view of how things went. Those of us with imposter syndrome are oftentimes waiting to be found out, found that we may not think that we're worthy of our accomplishments, that we're not always confident in the things that we're looking to present, that we might not always feel like we're the subject matter expert that others are looking for us to be. And we worry that other people are eventually going to see through us or realize that our accomplishments might be based on luck, good timing, or a happy accident. We can oftentimes end up thinking negatively about compliments we receive, or we tend to dismiss those compliments. But if we get a piece of feedback that hurts a little bit or is a piece of criticism, we tend to carry that around with us for a much longer period. It's actually really interesting because if you look at some of the statistics on imposter syndrome, 25 to 30% of high achievers are a high watermark number for people that are likely to suffer from imposter syndrome. And as many as 70% of adults may experience imposter syndrome at least once in their lifetime. So when we start to think about imposter syndrome, anyone can suffer from imposter syndrome, and you might be shocked to learn how many of the people that you trust and believe in that you would consider to be subject matter experts might actually be having feelings of imposter syndrome behind the scenes. So why do we believe this of ourselves? Why do we think that we might not be coming across as well as we believe that we should? Why do we view ourselves through this negative lens? Couple of things that could be at play here. Number one is personality traits. If you're a perfectionist, if you tend to suffer from self-doubt or fear, the pressure that we feel that we put on ourselves to perform at 100% all the time can actually lead to us feeling anxious when we inevitably have a bad day, a bad week, or a bad month. That happens to all of us, so we need to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room on making sure that we're cutting ourselves the same slack that we would cut to anyone else, and that we're being accepted, that not everyone is going to be able to deliver 100% all the time, every day. We also have to recognize competitive environments. Many of us might have grown up in a competitive environment academically. Many of us may work in organizations that still have a competitive environment that might use employee rankings, for example, to be able to differentiate employees. And that can also add to pressure that can lead to us feeling like we have to be perfect, we have to be always on, or there can't be a moment where we're delivering something less than a stellar experience. And that can also lead to those feelings of imposter syndrome. And then ironically, a string of work successes can also lead to us feeling that imposter syndrome moment of knowing it's that inevitable feeling that we can't always win. We can't always hit the high water mark. We can't always deliver that top quality performance. And we may live in fear of the moment when we can't or when we don't, and what that would actually look like. So what can we do if we feel the sense of imposter syndrome sinking in? One of the things that I recommend is owning your space and your voice. First of all, that can be managing your own headspace of talking with yourself, whether it's saying things out loud, practicing things ahead of time, or following up on that meeting and presentation regret with giving ourselves a redo after the fact, but making sure that you're standing in your own space. Many of us may still be working virtually or in the office, but one of the things that I always like to say is make sure that you're taking up your physical space, and yes, using your elbows a little bit to make sure that you're actually giving yourself the opportunity to say what's on your mind and to share the work expertise that you have on meetings. Make sure that you're focusing on your interpersonal and networking skills, that you're taking time to be able to meet with people and build those ever important relationships with the people that we work with and investing time. Make sure that you're working on overcoming the negative effects of past conditioning. If you have tended to get negative feedback from specific people in your organization, take time to think about whether or not that feedback is relevant. Take a holistic view at the feedback that you receive. Make sure that you're seeking feedback from people that you trust that are going to give you an active and thorough perspective on what it is that you're looking at. And make sure that you're being gentle with yourself. Oftentimes we are our own harshest critic, and one of the things that we really need to do and remember is to make sure that we're treating ourselves with kindness the same way that we would treat others. If you're working in a meeting, whether it's an in-person meeting or a remote meeting, one of the hardest things to do can be getting a word in, coming off of mute, especially on a virtual meeting, and be able to contribute something that you want to say. Sometimes I've actually been in meetings where the meeting has gotten away from me, right? You have other people participating in the meeting, and it might be hard to kind of rein the meeting back in. Same thing can happen on a presentation. So a couple of tips on things that you can do if you feel yourself not being able to get in a word edgewise or not being able to keep a meeting on track or presentation on track. First and foremost, it's really important to stay calm. Getting upset will keep you from delivering your best, and it almost always comes through in your voice, whether you're in person or virtual. If you're finding that one specific person is runaway training the meeting, meaning that they are tending to just keep rolling and rolling and rolling, and you need to try and interject, you need to try and get the meeting back on track, or you need to correct something that is inaccurate that's been said. One of the things that I like to do is to just really calmly say their first name a couple of times. If you say someone's first name a couple of times on a meeting, oftentimes it will actually interrupt their flow of what they're saying for just a half a second, giving you the ability to step in and actually say something at that point. If you can't break into the meeting at all, I've actually been known to send an instant message to ask someone else if they're going to have any luck breaking into the conversation and then handing it over to me. In fact, this is something that I also love to do with others in a meeting. So if I'm in a meeting and I know that Matt really wants to say something, I may come off mute if I can get a word in and say, you know what, I know Matt had something really great that he would like to share. Let's open up the floor because I'd really like to hear what Matt has to say. Not only does that give him the floor, but it projects confidence in the fact that he's going to have something really valuable to add. Next, you should definitely think about your personal brand at work. Your brand is the impression you leave behind, and it's the thing that people say about you when you're out of earshot or when you walk out of the room. If you're not sure what your personal brand is, ask around. Ask your leaders or coworkers that you trust how people describe you at work. And remember that the personal brand that you think you have and the personal brand that you actually have may be different. So it's really important that you don't make assumptions about what your personal brand is. Ask around, and if you find that there's a gap between the personal brand that you would like to have at work and the actual personal brand and what people think of you, that gives you an honest opportunity to be able to perform a gap analysis and try and figure out how you can move the dial from where you are to where you want to be at work. Make sure that you're seeking opportunities that will show off your skills. Make sure that you're building relationships with others that can help to promote you in the organization. And finally, make sure that you're standing in your own successes and accomplishments and that you're not afraid to lean into being able to say what you provide and what you give at work every day. You also need to really believe that you can do it. It's so important to speak up, raise your hand, and be heard. If you usually hold back in meetings, try leaning in and sharing your thoughts. If you suffer from imposter syndrome, it can be very positive to script out messages ahead of time, practice saying them, and you build muscle memory around those words to make it much easier on yourself that when you come off mute, your mind just knows automatically what it is that you want to say. So make sure that you don't wait to be invited in to that critical meeting, that critical opportunity, but that you take time to go after what you want. I'm also a big believer in development plans, so make sure that you're making notes for yourself on how you want to grow. Even if no one else sees those notes, it'll give you the ability to put a voice to the ways in which you want to grow this year or in the next 3 years or 5 years, and it'll give you an opportunity to build on that plan. Also, make sure that you internalize your accomplishments. One of the things that I always like to do is make sure that I'm practicing saying things out loud. I once had a leader who told me something very powerful. They said, you never know when you're going to be on the elevator with your company's CEO. So you should have a 30-second pitch, a 1-minute pitch, and a 2-minute pitch in your mind all the time on the things that you've done that have added value in your organization. If you're not sure what you would say if you were given 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes to talk to your CEO of your organization, now's a great time to think about that ahead of time and practice what those kinds of things may be, because you never know when you're going to have the opportunity to be able to give that honest feedback about the value that you bring in your organization. And then you want to make sure that you're giving and seeking candid feedback. Have you ever received a performance feedback review that included comments on your strengths but gave you no ideas on how you could improve? Many of us find it very easy to give positive feedback, but we find it much harder to give feedback on what people could do to grow. It's so important, whether you're a people leader or whether you're asked to provide peer feedback for your people that you work with, people on project teams, to take some time to think about not just what they do well, but what they could do to improve. That person may not receive improvement feedback from anyone else in their improvement cycle for that year, and that feedback can be critically important to helping them with their own personal development. You should also carefully evaluate the feedback that you receive. So make sure that you're listening to the feedback, that you consider it and evaluate it. You need to listen with an open mind, be comfortable asking questions, and reflect on the feedback that you heard. Consider its merits and then determine which pieces of that feedback that you most want to take to heart. It's also important, again, that you build a relationship with people who are truth tellers. I've worked with many different people, and some of my closest working relationships are with people who are going to tell me honestly their thoughts. Some of those thoughts may be, Sarah, you know what, I've seen you on a lot of meetings, and I've seen you say that better 100 times, and this wasn't a great day for you being able to clearly express what you said. But you know what? That's someone who's going to tell me the truth about what that looks like, and those relationships are invaluable to make sure that you're getting a clear perspective on how you're doing. The other thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is calling out poor behavior and then letting it go. Many of my female technologists, myself included, have received inappropriate feedback after a meeting or a presentation. We receive comments on our appearance instead of on the content of what we're saying. Or we're told that we're too nice, we're too difficult, or that we came across sounding too smart. It's really important to think about this kind of feedback. Call it out where you need to if you see it occurring in the wild, even if this inappropriate feedback is given in front of you to others and not yourself. But then make sure that you're doing the appropriate thing with this kind of inappropriate feedback, dumping it in the trash and being able to move forward. You don't want to put it in your backpack and take it along with you, because at the end of the day, it's inappropriate feedback and there's no reason to carry it along with you on your journey. Then finally, we want to make sure that you're building that community of support. I already talked about truth tellers. So important that you're going to get peer feedback from people that will tell you the truth about the things in the areas where you shine and the areas where you think that you need to do some work. Those are going to be the people who will tell you honestly what your personal brand is, what people are saying about you when you're out of earshot, which will give you the opportunity to be able to increase your skills, enhance your personal brand, and be able to move forward. You also want to build mentor relationships. Seek out, and it's very important that you not only find a mentor, but that you serve as a mentor for others. I actually learned so much more from my mentee relationships for people that I mentor than sometimes I even do from those that are mentoring me. And it's very important that I think that you build relationships, mentor and mentee relationships with people that are at very different stages of their career than you are, because it gives you a really diverse perspective on the different challenges and the opportunities that arise at so many different levels in our career. And then make sure that you're building alliances and advocates and sponsors for yourself across your company. One of the most powerful things that I've been able to do in my career is to actually form and be part of small group empowerment circles. Sometimes that looks like 5 or 6 of us meeting over coffee, digitally or in person, to be able to talk about work situations, to be able to talk about leadership scenarios, and to give each other practical advice on what we do in a similar scenario or opportunity. Sometimes I've been part of circles that have been very structured at companies where we actually have articles to read, videos to listen to, and we come in and have structured discussion time on what that might look like, what we can take from that, and what we've learned from those circumstances. Here's the important thing. If your company has a leadership program where you can participate in empowerment circles, alliance networks, and opportunities, that's fantastic. If you don't have that at your organization, you can start an informal empowerment circle today by connecting with a few colleagues and asking them if they'd like to participate. It can be formal or informal. It can be as rich and dynamic as meeting in person and having structured conversations, or meeting dynamically virtually with coffee. And then make sure that you're focused on giving back. The more that you mentor others, the more that you invest in others, the richer the rewards that you're going to receive. So as with many things, I think that we always learn the most when we actually give of ourselves to others. So make sure that you're thinking about giving back as you move forward. So with that, I'm actually going to say thank you so much for participating. I know you've had the opportunity to submit questions. My information is on here on the screen, but I'm going to ask Allie if you would read off some of the questions that have come in.
Sure. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. So yeah, we have a million great questions coming in from the attendees.
Awesome.
One from our friend Daryl, with some conversations happening around. Daryl asked, how do you get the courage to call out when you don't know something and need help to find the answer when you're supposed to be the expert?
You know what? I do this all the time, and I always tell my team the same thing. In my day job, I teach a lot of training classes, and I always say the same thing. I'll be on a training class, and it might be with 20 people, or it might be 1,000 people on the line. And I will oftentimes have a lead in that says, you know what? That's such an interesting question. Jamie, would you mind jumping in and taking the answer to that question? And then I'll go on mute. And I might do that for a few reasons. Number one, it might be because I have no idea what the answer is, but I know Jamie's going to know. Sometimes it's that I want to go on mute so I can take a drink of water or a sip of my tea. And sometimes I just want to stop talking for a few seconds and give someone else an opportunity to go. But I oftentimes find that you don't have to say, I don't know the answer. You can say something like hand it off to someone else, or you can say, you know what, Daryl, that's a really great question. Let me look into that and get back to you. And as long as you actually do look into it and you do get back to them, that actually does nothing to limit your expertise. It actually shows that you have follow through.
I love that. And then a lot of questions coming in around giving difficult feedback, suggestions on how to have difficult conversations and provide maybe critical feedback even to somebody above you, like a manager.
That can be so hard. And I think it depends on the opportunity and how you're able to give that critical feedback. One of the things that I always look at, and it comes from years of being a librarian and a communicator and a technical writer, is that you need to consider the audience in terms of how you're going to deliver that feedback. Some people are going to be able to receive that feedback directly. You're going to be able to set up a video chat or a conversation with them and really have an open and honest conversation. I usually like to front it to say, you know what, I have some authentic feedback for you. I want to set it up as now a good time to go in and actually talk about that and cover that feedback. Sometimes we have the ability to give constructive feedback in written form, especially if it's during like an annual performance cycle for someone. And sometimes that would actually be somewhat not anonymous, but it might be that feedback might be going to their leader and not directly to them, in which case sometimes we can be a little bit more direct with that feedback. But always, whether you're a people leader or an individual contributor, sometimes you're going to be put in a hard situation where even though it's uncomfortable and awkward, you have to be willing to take a deep breath and say, I'm going to lean in, I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to try and do this well. It's okay to say, you know what, I have to give you some hard feedback. I'm going to try and do it as delicately as I can, but then own up to the fact that none of us are going to be able to deliver that in an excellent way every day. And it's okay to be human about it.
Totally, yeah. Okay, yeah, there's a couple other questions coming in about leaders, I think, related to kind of the elevator pitch that you talked about. But one side, this is from Anonymous. I've gone from having quite a bit of FaceTime with leaders when we were in person to a fleeting minute or two every few months since we've gone permanently remote. Do you have any tips for maximizing those rare moments when you get the attention of leaders?
You know what? I think it's even more important if you have those rare fleeting moments where you can do that. It's even more important to not only know what are the key points that I want to think about. And I always think about that as an inverted pyramid. If you only have a few seconds, what's the most important thing you want to share? So make sure that you're structuring it with the most important headlines at the top and then the less important details as you go down. That's why I say that inverted pyramid view. But also make sure that you're thinking about the audience of who those leaders are and how they like to receive that information. One of the things that I always say is that I deliver an awful lot of my information in PowerPoint, not because that's necessarily the tool that I love most, but it's what my managers and my senior leaders like seeing information in. So if you're talking about only having a few seconds to deliver feedback to your leaders, stop and think about how those leaders might best receive that feedback. Do they want to have an informal conversation with you? Do they want to see something formal in writing? And make sure that you're actually trying to deliver the information in an appropriate manner to the audience that you're trying to get to receive it.
Awesome. And I think this is, you know, kind of similar just with the department, with a lot of people's jobs being remote. Someone said, now that my department is permanently remote, there's a lot of mystery about how to get promoted. Do you have any tips to get leaders to really see that you want to grow when they don't actually physically see you anymore?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that you can do is make sure that if you don't have regular performance conversations, one-on-ones, or even informal chats with your boss or your senior leaders now that you're remote, lean in and set that up. One of the things that I see people doing really often is they wait. They say, I'm focused on doing a good job. I'm going to patiently wait until my leader reaches out and sets up time to talk with me about my performance, how I'm doing, what I'm thinking at work, or even my ideas about how to improve things. Don't wait. Send them an IM, send them an email, ask them and say, hey, I have some ideas or I have some things I'd like to share. I'd love to have a one-on-one conversation with you, and ask them, can I go ahead and set that up with you? Can I work with your admin to set that up? But lean into setting up those conversations. Don't sit and wait for your leader to be able to circle back and have those conversations with you, because most of the time they don't realize that you have something to say. And if they don't know that you have something to say, then you might miss that wonderful opportunity to be able to share your thoughts on either your career growth and strategy, accomplishments and things you've done well, or even just to have that interpersonal human interaction with your leader. So lean in, send an IM, send an email, instigate the conversation.
Okay, well, I think we're just about a minute over time, so I'll let it go there. There's tons of great questions. I highly encourage you all to connect with Sarah. She's amazing. So connect with her offline. I know you can all learn a lot from each other.
Thanks, Allie. Thanks, everybody.